We're bringing in consultants with fresh perspectives, Caleb, Julian Keene, our new CEO, stated, his voice smooth as he slid the termination papers across the polished mahogany table. Your legacy systems are holding us back. My name is Caleb Mercer. I'm 47 years old, and until that very moment, I had been the senior systems architect at Ironvale Technologies for 18 years. I built their core software platform from little more than caffeine, code, and sheer willpower when we were just 6 people working out of a cramped warehouse in Seattle. I nodded, showing no emotion, and took the packet. I didn't argue, didn't plead. I just said, I understand, and began packing the few personal items from my desk while an HR representative watched impassively. Julian had been with us for exactly 3 months. Young guy, barely 40, brought in by the private equity firm that had acquired Ironvale the previous year. He wore expensive custom suits, spoke in corporate buzzwords about streamlining operations and modernizing our approach. He never once asked me how the system, his company's lifeline, actually worked. That morning, I'd watched him strut into the office flanked by 2 slick consultants from some trendy firm in San Francisco. It didn't take a genius to figure out where things were headed. If you've ever poured your heart and soul into your work, only to be dismissed by someone who doesn't understand its value, then this story might resonate with you. Stay with us at Life Stories 1 and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the outcome. 18 years. I'd turned down better-paying jobs at bigger companies. I'd missed my son's baseball games, my daughter Olivia's school plays. I'd spent countless nights, weekends, and holidays troubleshooting server issues while everyone else slept. I did it because I believed in what we were building at Ironvale. They gave me 30 minutes to clear out my desk. I took 15. On my way out, my box of belongings in hand, I passed Donna from accounting. She'd been with Ironvale almost as long as I had, since the early lean days. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Caleb? What's happening? Time for fresh perspectives, Donna, I said quietly. The security guard, Tyler, a good kid, his father and I sometimes fished together on weekends, walked me out. He looked at the ground, embarrassed. I'm really sorry about this, Mr. Mercer. Not your fault, Tyler, I told him. I drove home in silence, the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers clearing the relentless Seattle rain the only sound. My wife, Karen, wasn't home yet. I set my box on the kitchen counter and pulled out its contents, my favorite coffee mug, a few framed family photos, and a small, unassuming external hard drive. Nothing that was company property. Then, I made a fresh pot of coffee and pulled out my personal laptop. I opened a folder I'd created years ago, a digital safety deposit box. Inside was meticulous documentation, code commits, design notes, and critically, a time-stamped copyright registration certificate from the U.S. Copyright Office. It all proved unequivocally that I had written the core foundational algorithm that powered Ironvale's entire software platform on my own time, using my own equipment in my own home. The copyright registration predated my official employment contract with Ironvale by a good 6 months. I'd later offered the algorithm to the fledgling company on a perpetual license basis, a specific legal arrangement the new management, in their infinite wisdom, had clearly never bothered to research. I sipped my coffee, a strange calm settling over me. I knew I wouldn't need to wait long. Without proper understanding and maintenance, the first critical system, the one most heavily reliant on that core algorithm, would begin to fail within days. I first met Harold Voss, the original founder of Ironvale, back in 2004 at a small programming conference in Portland. We bonded instantly over a shared frustration with the clunky, inefficient inventory management systems prevalent at the time. He had just started Ironvale with his brother-in-law and 3 other developers. Their initial product showed promise, but it couldn't scale. It hit a performance wall with any significant data load. Over beers that evening, I sketched out the basic structure of an algorithm on a cocktail napkin, an algorithm I believed could solve their database bottleneck and allow for exponential growth. He hired me on the spot. For the first 5 years, We all worked 80-hour weeks, fueled by passion and cheap pizza. I missed my daughter Olivia's first steps because I was wrestling with a catastrophic server crash. Karen nearly left me twice. "You're married to that company, Caleb," she'd said, her voice tight with unshed tears. She wasn't wrong. When Harold had his heart attack in 2011, a scary time for all of us, I stepped up. Not as CEO, I never wanted that kind of job, but as the unwavering technical backbone of the company. I kept the systems running, the clients happy, and the development team focused while everyone else was understandably panicking. When potential investors came sniffing around, I was the one who walked them through our growth metrics, our technical advantages. When larger competitors tried poaching our top talent, I was the one who convinced our key engineers to stay, appealing to their belief in our shared vision. Harold sold the company in 2019. He said he was tired, wanted to spend more time with his grandkids. I understood, but I felt that first ominous crack forming in the foundation of the company I loved. The new owners were different, a faceless conglomerate. All quarterly numbers and growth projections, less about the craft, the innovation. Then came the pandemic. Our system, robust and scalable thanks to that core algorithm, kept functioning flawlessly when many others faltered. Our clients, hospitals, critical supply chains, government agencies, relied on us completely, more than ever before. I worked 20-hour days for weeks on end, ensuring nothing broke, that our services remained uninterrupted. The board gave me a shiny plaque and a decent bonus. Nice gestures, but they missed the point. Last year, another acquisition. This time, a private equity firm. They were the ones who installed Julian Keene as CEO. 2 weeks after he started, Julian canceled our annual engineering development retreat, a vital event for team building and strategic planning. An unnecessary expense, he called it, though it cost less than his own reported signing bonus. 3 weeks in, he unilaterally reorganized the entire engineering team without consulting me or any of the senior technical staff, breaking up cohesive units and causing widespread confusion. He brought in his old Stanford buddies as strategy consultants who knew nothing about our specific market or technology. A month ago, during a management meeting, he publicly called my architectural approach old school and said we needed to rethink our entire approach from the ground up. I saw it coming, the writing on the wall. But I kept my head down, kept the systems running, kept doing my job. Karen noticed something was seriously wrong. She's always been perceptive that way. "They're pushing you out, aren't they, Caleb?" she asked quietly one night. "Maybe," I admitted. "What are you going to do?" she pressed. I just shrugged then. But that following weekend, I updated all my personal records, double-verified my copyright registration for the algorithm, made sure my personal code repositories were meticulously documented and time-stamped. Not because I planned to cause trouble, just because, as a systems architect, I believe in being prepared for any eventuality. Through all of this, I kept one critical piece of information to myself. The original algorithm, the mathematical heart of everything Ironvale sold, had never actually been transferred to the company as an asset. I had licensed it to them. There's a difference, a very big, legally significant difference. 3 days after my unceremonious termination, I was in the backyard, finally getting around to fixing a section of our old fence that had been leaning precariously since last winter's storms. That's when my phone, which I'd left on the patio table, started buzzing incessantly. 5 missed calls from Ironvale Technologies' main number, 2 more from Julian Keene's direct line, and 1 voicemail. Curious, I wiped the sweat from my brow and played it. "Caleb, this is Julian." His voice was strained, all the previous arrogance gone. "We seem to be experiencing some, significant issues with the core systems. We could really use your expertise on this. Call me back as soon as possible. It's urgent." I put my phone back on the table and continued hammering nails into the fence post. An hour later, the barrage resumed. More calls from Julian. Texts from former team members started flooding in. "Systems are crashing all over the place, Caleb. Nobody knows what to do." The new consultants tried to optimize something in the main algorithm, and now everything's broken. Clients are screaming, threatening to pull their contracts. I finished repairing the fence, showered, and then made dinner for Karen and the kids. We watched a movie together, a rare, peaceful family evening. I turned my phone off completely. The next morning, I woke up to an email from Julian. Its subject line marked Urgent Consulting Opportunity. He was now offering me $300 per hour to come in and assist with some minor transition issues. There was no mention of my firing, no apology, just a desperate attempt to get me back in the door. I politely declined via email, citing prior commitments. By noon that day, their legal team contacted me. A formal, vaguely threatening letter arrived, alluding to proprietary technology and ongoing employee obligations to the company. I forwarded it to my lawyer, Sarah, without comment. Sarah called me an hour later, and I could hear the amusement in her voice. "Caleb, they clearly haven't read your original contracts, or if they have, they haven't understood them," she said, chuckling. "The copyright for that core algorithm is registered to you personally, clear as day. You granted Ironvale a license, yes, but that license usually explicitly prohibits any modification, reverse engineering, or derivative works without your prior written consent, which I assume they never obtained from you before letting these consultants tinker with it?" "Not a word," I confirmed. "Then you're completely in the clear, Caleb. They're the ones in breach, not you." That's when the full reality of the situation truly hit me. 18 years. All that sacrifice, the missed school recitals and birthdays, the countless sleepless nights nursing those servers, and they had discarded me like a piece of outdated hardware, without a second thought, without even bothering to understand the very foundation of the technology they had acquired. I walked to my home office and pulled out a business card I'd kept tucked away in my desk drawer for nearly a year. Elaine Winters, CTO of Meridian Systems. She was a sharp, visionary leader in a related industry. She'd approached me at a tech conference the previous spring, deeply impressed with what Ironvale had built, particularly the scalability and reliability of our platform. "If you ever decide you want to change, Caleb," she'd said, her eyes direct and sincere, "a real challenge, with a company that truly values deep architectural expertise, we'd create something special for you at Meridian." I'd been loyal to Ironvale then, despite my growing unease about Julian and the private equity owners. Now I was free. I didn't call Elaine immediately. Instead, I drove out to Lake Washington, found a quiet spot by the water, and just sat there for a long time, watching the ferries cut silently through the gray water. For the first time in years, my thoughts weren't consumed by server loads or code deployments or looming project deadlines. My phone rang again. Caller ID, Julian Keene. I let it ring for a while, then finally answered. "Caleb," he said, his voice tight with panic, "we really need to talk. The situation here is critical." "I'm listening, Julian," I said calmly. "Our clients are threatening to leave in droves. The consultants, they can't figure out your system architecture. We need you back, Caleb, now." "As what, Julian?" I asked. There was a pause on his end, a moment of strained calculation. As a senior consultant," he finally stammered. "With appropriate compensation, of course." "Very appropriate." "And what about the outdated legacy systems?" I couldn't resist asking. Another longer pause. We may have been hasty in our initial assessment of some of those systems," he conceded, his voice barely a whisper. I watched a blue heron land gracefully on a weathered dock across the water, its movements precise and unhurried. "I'll think about it, Julian," I said, though I already knew, with absolute certainty, that I wouldn't be going back. Not as a consultant, not on their terms, not ever again. On the drive home, my mind was quiet, but resolute. The realization that had been slowly dawning on me was now crystal clear. It wasn't just that they desperately needed me, it was that I, Caleb Mercer, no longer needed them at all. 2 days later, I accepted Elaine Winter's lunch invitation. We met at a quiet, upscale restaurant in Bellevue, well away from Seattle's bustling tech district. "I heard about Ironvale's situation," she said diplomatically after we'd ordered, her expression a mixture of professional concern and, perhaps, a touch of opportunism. "Their systems have been unstable for nearly a week now, from what our industry contacts are saying." I nodded, but said nothing, letting her continue. "Their clients are getting extremely nervous," she went on, "especially the healthcare networks and the logistics companies. They can't afford this kind of prolonged disruption." I took a slow sip of water. "They have capable engineers at Ironvale, Elaine," I said finally. "Or at least they did. But they no longer have the architect who designed and built the core." She studied me for a long moment, her gaze thoughtful. "You built something truly remarkable there, Caleb. Something foundational, something that shouldn't be lost or dismantled because of corporate short-sightedness and arrogance." She slid a sleek, leather-bound folder across the table towards me. Inside was a formal job offer. Chief Innovation Officer at Meridian Systems. The proposed salary was nearly twice what I'd been making at Ironvale. A significant equity stake in Meridian, and, perhaps most appealingly, the budget and autonomy to build and lead a world-class development team of my own choosing. "We want to build the next generation of what you created at Ironvale, Caleb," Elaine said, her voice earnest. "But this time, with you properly valued, properly supported, and properly rewarded from day one." I told her I'd think about it, that I needed to discuss it with Karen first. It was a huge decision, a new chapter. When I got home that afternoon, there was a black sedan with tinted windows parked discreetly down the street from our house. Two men in expensive, ill-fitting suits were standing on my porch, Ironvale's lawyers. "Mr. Mercer," the older one said, his tone officious as I approached. "We've been trying to reach you regarding an urgent company matter." "I'm not with the company anymore," I reminded him politely. "This concerns intellectual property allegedly developed during your employment with Ironvale Technologies," the lawyer continued, undeterred. "We'll need to take possession of all your personal computing devices, laptops, hard drives, tablets, phones, for a thorough forensic examination. It's standard procedure in these situations to protect the company's assets." I knew exactly what they were after. They were desperately searching for any shred of evidence that I'd taken company code or used company resources to develop my algorithm after I was officially employed. Anything they could use to try and invalidate my pre-existing copyright and claim ownership. "You'll need to speak with my attorney," I said calmly, handing them Sarah's business card. "I have nothing else to discuss with you directly." They looked displeased, but eventually retreated to their sedan. That evening, Julian Keene called again, his voice frayed with exasperation. "Your lawyer is being incredibly difficult, Caleb," he complained. "This whole situation could get very messy, very quickly. Legal battles, public statements, damage to reputations. None of us want that, do we?" "What do you want, Julian?" I asked, my patience wearing thin. "Come back," he pleaded. 6 months, full salary, plus a hefty bonus. Just help the transition team understand the systems, get them stabilized, and then we'll part ways amicably. The company retains all rights to the technology, of course, and you get a clean break, a generous severance package." "Julian," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "The core algorithm, the one everything else is built on, was never Ironvale's property to begin with. I licensed it to the company, under specific terms, before I was even an official employee." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, That's absurd, Caleb. Everything you developed while at Ironvale was work for hire, standard employment contract." "Check the original licensing agreement from 2004, Julian," I advised him. "The one between me, Caleb Mercer as an individual, and Ironvale Technologies. It's still binding, and it clearly outlines my ownership of the underlying intellectual property." That documentation doesn't exist," he stammered, his voice suddenly uncertain. "We've been through all the corporate archives, every file. Harold Voss kept a copy, I informed him. I kept a copy, and most importantly, the U.S. Copyright Office has a copy on file, registered in my name. It predates my Ironvale employment by 6 months. More silence. Then, We'll need to verify that claim, he finally said, his voice tight with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror. Take your time, Julian, I said, and hung up. The next day, Ironvale, in a panic, locked out all my former team members from system access, while the expert consultants from San Francisco made another desperate attempt to rebuild or bypass the core algorithm. By evening, 3 more major client servers had crashed completely, bringing their operations to a screeching halt. Karen found me in the garage later that night, methodically organizing tools I hadn't touched in years, a strange sense of calm purpose settling over me. They're completely imploding, aren't they? She asked softly, leaning against the workbench. I nodded, continuing to sort wrenches by size. Does that make you happy, Caleb? She wondered. I put down the wrench I was holding and looked at her. No, I said honestly. There are good people still working at Ironvale, people who care. They don't deserve this chaos. Neither did you, Caleb, she said gently, her hand finding mine. The following morning, Ironvale's stock dropped a precipitous 20% when news of the critical, ongoing system failures finally broke in the financial press. My phone lit up with texts from my former team members, all variations on the same theme. What did you do, Caleb? Did you sabotage something before you left? I responded to each one with the same simple, truthful message. I did nothing. They modified a licensed software component without authorization, thereby violating the terms of the license and destabilizing the system. By that afternoon, Julian Keene had gone from threats and legal posturing to outright bargaining. He called again, his voice stripped of all arrogance, offering me a truly substantial consulting contract, a public apology from the company, even a seat on some newly formed technical advisory board. I didn't respond. That evening, one of the San Francisco consultants, presumably after a frantic search through dusty archived files, finally found the original licensing agreement, the one between me and Harold Voss, tucked away in Harold's old pre-acquisition records. Within an hour, Ironvale's chastened legal team contacted my attorney, Sarah. Their tone, she later told me, was entirely different this time. The elaborate trap they thought they had set for me had collapsed, spectacularly, around them instead. A week after my termination, with Ironvale Technologies visibly crumbling, I met Harold Voss for lunch. He'd been retired for 3 years, enjoying his grandkids and his fishing boat, but he still kept a keen eye on the company he'd poured his life into founding. They really stepped in it this time, Caleb, he said, shaking his head as we sat down at his favorite old-school diner in Tacoma, well away from the Seattle tech bubble where anyone might recognize us. Trying to rebuild your core algorithm from scratch with those consultants. He practically spat the word. Idiots! Did you know this would happen, Harold? I asked, genuinely curious. Did you anticipate this level of incompetence? Harold slowly stirred his coffee. I knew they didn't understand what they actually bought, Caleb. These private equity types, they rarely do. They see numbers on a spreadsheet, profit margins, market share. They don't see the architecture, the intricate design, the years of iterative refinement that make a complex system actually work. He reached into his worn leather briefcase and pulled out an equally worn folder, sliding it across the table towards me. Remember this? He asked, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Inside was our original partnership agreement, dated 2004. Not the standard company employment contract Julian's lawyers had been waving around, but the personal agreement between Harold Voss and Caleb Mercer, the one we'd drafted together, with a good lawyer before Ironvale was even properly incorporated. It stated, in clear, unambiguous language, that the inventory management algorithm I had developed remained my personal intellectual property, with Ironvale Technologies receiving an exclusive perpetual license to use it, contingent on my continued employment or a mutually agreed-upon separation agreement with full acknowledgement of my IP rights. You protected me, even back then, I said, a wave of gratitude washing over me for his foresight. Harold nodded. You were taking a hell of a risk, Caleb, joining a fledgling startup with an unproven concept. I wanted to make sure you kept ownership of your core creation if things ever went south, or if new ownership didn't appreciate what they had. Did you ever tell the new owners about this agreement, about the licensing terms? I asked. I tried, Harold said with a sigh. Mentioned it briefly during the due diligence process when the private equity firm was sniffing around. They weren't interested in historical, technical details from the past. He made air quotes with his fingers. They just wanted the assets, the client list, the projected revenue streams. That's when the full, ugly picture finally came into sharp focus. Julian Keene hadn't just fired me on a whim because he wanted fresh perspectives. The private equity firm, the real power behind the throne, was almost certainly planning to strip Ironvale for parts, sell off the lucrative client relationships, bundle up the proprietary technology, and sell it separately, all for maximum short-term profit. They needed me gone, not because I was outdated, but because I was the only one who truly understood how everything connected, the only one who might raise uncomfortable questions or stand in the way of their asset-stripping plans. My termination wasn't about modernizing the company. It was about making their planned dismantling of it easier and more profitable for them. There's more, Caleb, Harold said quietly, his eyes holding a new intensity. Before I finalized the sale of Ironvale to that private equity group, I had my lawyers insert a very specific, very unusual clause into the final sale agreement. A key technology clause. He leaned forward. It states that if the core technology platform, specifically your algorithm and its primary dependent systems, becomes non-functional or inoperable for more than 10 consecutive business days, I, Harold Voss, have the right to buy back the entire company, Ironvale Technologies, at a predetermined price, a price based on its valuation before these clowns ran it into the ground. I stared at him, stunned. Why on earth would they agree to a clause like that? They didn't read the fine print carefully enough, Harold said, a grim smile touching his lips. They were too focused on closing the deal, too eager to get their hands on what they thought was a cash cow. I also told them, rather convincingly, that such a clause actually protected their investment, ensuring that the core technology, the main asset, would always be maintained. They bought it. So you can buy it back, I said, the implications starting to dawn. No, Caleb, he corrected gently. We can buy it back. I've got some money set aside, and I've already spoken to a few of the original angel investors who backed us in the early days. They're interested, very interested. But we'd need you, Caleb, not just your algorithm, but your leadership, and we'd need more capital. The pieces were shifting in my mind, forming a new, unexpected pattern. This wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about something more precise, more satisfying. Nusising. It was about correction, about restoration. That evening, I received an email from an anonymous account. Inside was a chain of internal Ironvale communications, damning evidence that Julian Keene and the San Francisco consultants had indeed been actively planning to sell off Ironvale's most profitable division, the healthcare systems unit, to a direct competitor. Such a move would have blatantly violated numerous client confidentiality agreements and potentially exposed sensitive patient data, a catastrophic legal and ethical breach. One of my former team members, someone still inside Ironvale, was clearly feeding me critical information, risking their own position to do the right thing. I immediately forwarded the entire package to my lawyer, Sarah, who confirmed its explosive implications. The next day, 3 of Ironvale's largest healthcare clients, likely tipped off by the same internal whistleblower, publicly announced they were suspending their contracts with Ironvale due to ongoing system reliability concerns and potential data security vulnerabilities. Their combined business represented nearly 40% of the company's total annual revenue. By the weekend, Ironvale's board, now in full panic mode, called an emergency meeting. Julian Keene was summarily placed on administrative leave, a corporate euphemism for being sidelined pending termination. On day 9 of the critical system failures, with the 10-day buyback clause deadline looming, Ironvale's newly appointed interim CEO and their thoroughly chastened general counsel reached out to my lawyer with a settlement offer, a 7-figure payment to me personally, in exchange for an immediate and permanent license reinstatement for the core algorithm. I didn't respond. That night, Karen and I sat on our back deck, watching the lights of Seattle twinkle across the water. "Harold wants to buy the company back, Karen," I told her quietly. "He has a clause." "With you?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "He says we can buy it back. With me as CTO, likely. But it would mean a lot." She took my hand, her grip firm. "Do you want that, Caleb? After everything they put you through?" I thought about my 18 years at Ironvale, the code I'd written in the dead of night, the problems I'd solved, the team I'd built. I thought about the missed family moments, the sacrifices. "I'm not sure yet," I said honestly, "but tomorrow is day 10. Day 10 arrived with Ironvale Technologies' critical systems still offline, their core platform paralyzed. Financial analysts were openly predicting imminent bankruptcy if the situation continued. My former colleagues reported that the once bustling Ironvale office was now half empty, a ghost town populated by a skeleton crew and the dregs of the San Francisco consulting team, who were reportedly blaming each other for the catastrophe. I met with Harold Voss and my lawyer, Sarah, at a private legal office downtown. Elaine Winters, the CTO of Meridian Systems, joined us via secure video call, her expression keen and focused. "The Ironvale board is desperate, Caleb," Sarah explained, laying out the latest communications. "They've just officially offered you $3 million, personally, for a permanent, irrevocable license transfer of your algorithm. They're bleeding cash and clients by the hour." "And if we wait?" I asked, looking at Harold. Harold smiled, a spark of his old entrepreneurial fire in his eyes. "My buyback clause, the one they dismissed as irrelevant, activates at midnight tonight. The predetermined price for me to reacquire the entire company, assets, liabilities, everything, is $8 million. He leaned forward. "I've already secured $4 million in backing from our original angel investor group. They believe in what Ironvale was and what it can be again. The other $4 million would have to come from new partners." All eyes, including mine, turned to Elaine on the video screen. "Meridian Systems is prepared to partner in this venture, Harold Caleb," Elaine said without hesitation. "We will provide the remaining $4 million in capital for a 40% equity stake in the new Ironvale Technologies, contingent on Caleb joining as Chief Technology Officer with an appropriate, significant equity position of his own." I hadn't expected this particular twist, this level of direct involvement from Meridian. "I thought you wanted me to come work at Meridian, Elaine," I said, surprised. "This is better, Caleb," Elaine replied, a strategic glint in her eye. "You'd be rebuilding something that truly matters to you, with the right team, the right vision, and the right support. And our two companies, Ironvale and Meridian, could then develop powerful joint ventures and strategic partnerships that would benefit us both immensely in the long run." My mind raced through the possibilities. Taking back Ironvale, with Harold's wisdom and Meridian's backing, would mean saving dozens of jobs, protecting client relationships built over nearly 2 decades, and, most importantly, continuing the innovative work I genuinely believed in. "There's one more thing," I said, looking at Harold, and then at Elaine. "The current employees at Ironvale, the ones who stuck it out, the ones who tried to keep things running despite the chaos Julian created, many of them have been loyal for years. They deserve protection in this transition." "Agreed, Caleb," Harold said firmly. "No layoffs of existing performing staff for at least 6 months, and we will implement an employee stock ownership program within the first year. They deserve to be part-owners of the company they helped build." I nodded. This felt right. "Then I'm in." We spent the rest of that day in a whirlwind of focused activity. My lawyer drafted the necessary license transfer agreement with specific conditions tied to the buyback and new ownership structure. Harold contacted key Ironvale board members he'd known for years, soberly explaining the situation and the only viable path forward. Elaine's team prepared the formal partnership terms between Meridian and the soon-to-be reformed Ironvale. At 5 p.m., we submitted formal, legally binding notice of Harold Voss's intent to exercise his buyback option, effective at midnight. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. It was Julian Keene, his voice frantic, laced with a panic I'd never heard from him before. "Caleb, whatever Harold and Meridian are offering you, we'll double it. Just fix the systems, Caleb. Fix them today before this whole thing blows up." "It's not about money, Julian," I said calmly. "Then what is it about?" he almost shrieked. "A public apology? Your old job back? With a raise? Name it, Caleb. Anything." "It's about building something that lasts, Julian," I told him. "Something that matters. Something based on integrity, not just quarterly returns. This is business, Caleb, not some idealistic crusade," he sputtered. I hung up. By 8 p.m., Julian Keene had been officially terminated by the Ironvale board. They reached out to Harold and me directly, their tone now one of complete capitulation. "We've made mistakes, gentlemen," the chairman of the board admitted, his voice heavy. "But we believe we can still make this right, for the company, for the shareholders." "You're right, Mr. Chairman," I agreed. "You can make this right by honoring Harold's legally binding buyback clause and facilitating an orderly, immediate transition of ownership." At 11:30 p.m., just 30 minutes before the midnight deadline, they conceded. The Ironvale board officially approved Harold Voss's buyback of the company. Meridian Systems partnership was accepted. The complex web of paperwork was signed, sealed, and delivered electronically. At precisely midnight, I sat at my kitchen table and composed a simple email to my former team at Ironvale. Subject: Important update. Ironvale Technologies. Team, I wrote. The core algorithm and all affected systems will be reinstated and fully functional by morning. Ironvale Technologies is now under new ownership. No jobs will be lost. I will explain everything at an all-hands meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Looking forward to working with you all again. Caleb Mercer, CTO. Karen sat beside me as I hit send, her hand resting gently on my shoulder. "So," she said softly, "you're really going back." "Not back, Karen," I corrected her, a smile finally touching my lips. "Forward. It's a different company now, with different terms and a different purpose." "You'll be busier than ever," she sighed, though there was a twinkle in her eye. "For a while, yes," I admitted. "But this time, Karen, I promise, I won't miss the important stuff." She smiled, a little skeptical perhaps, but supportive, as always. The next morning, I drove to the Ironvale office for the first time since my termination. People stared as I walked through the lobby. Some looked confused, others visibly relieved. Donna from accounting spotted me by the elevators and rushed over to give me a hug. "Caleb, what happened?" she whispered, her eyes wide. "It's a long story, Donna," I said with a grin. "But the short version is, sometimes you have to let something break completely before you can fix it properly." The main conference room was packed for the all-hands meeting. Harold Voss stood at the front, looking more energized and vibrant than I'd seen him in years. Elaine Winters joined by videoconference, her image projected onto the large screen. I took my place beside them, feeling the collective gaze of the room, the weight of expectation, but also a profound sense of hope, of what we were about to rebuild, together. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. 6 months after regaining control of Ironvale Technologies, we held a major product launch at the Seattle Convention Center. The room was packed with clients, industry analysts, and media. Harold opened the event with a heartfelt recounting of the company's history and its renewed vision. Elaine spoke eloquently about our strong partnership with Meridian Systems and the innovative joint ventures already underway. Then it was my turn. I stepped to the podium, acutely aware that Julian Keene was sitting in the back row, no doubt sent by his new employer, a competitor, to gather intelligence. Today, I began, we're not just unveiling a new product, we're unveiling a new Ironvale. We call it Integrasphere. The screens behind me lit up, displaying the sleek, intuitive interface of our completely reimagined system architecture, powerful, elegant, and built for the future. What makes this system unique isn't just the technology, I continued, my voice resonating with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. It's the people behind it, our incredible team, many of whom have been with Ironvale for over a decade, built this together from the ground up. I nodded towards the front row where my core development team sat, beaming. And because we believe in rewarding that dedication, we've restructured our company so that every employee now has an ownership stake in Ironvale. Their commitment deserves nothing less. The audience applauded warmly. I noticed Julian shifting uncomfortably in his seat. We've also established the Ironvale Foundation, I announced, which will open-source select components of our technology for use in education, nonprofits, and public service initiatives. We believe in giving back to the community that has supported us. More applause, louder this time. And finally, I said, pausing for effect, I'm incredibly pleased to announce that every single client who was affected by last year's system failures will receive 2 full years of service on our new Integrasphere platform at no charge, along with dedicated migration support to ensure a seamless transition. The room erupted. It was a bold, expensive move, but Harold, Elaine, and I had been unanimous in our decision. Rebuilding trust, demonstrating our renewed commitment to our clients, was worth any cost. As we opened the floor for questions, I saw Julian Keene slip quietly out the back door. He had come expecting to witness a company limping back from disaster. Instead, he had witnessed one completely transformed by it, stronger and more purposeful than ever before. His new employer's stock dropped 8% by the closing bell that day. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about striking back. It's about rising higher, building better, and proving them wrong through your success. 1 year after the buyback, I drove out to Lake Washington on a clear, crisp Saturday morning. No laptop, no phone, just a fishing rod and a small cooler. Harold was waiting for me in his old wooden boat, his silver hair glinting beneath his worn baseball cap. "Right on time, Caleb," he said with a grin as I climbed aboard. We navigated to his favorite quiet cove and cast our lines, enjoying the comfortable silence. "Board approved the next phase of the employee ownership expansion," Harold mentioned casually after a while. "Another 5% allocated across the team." "Good," I said, watching my line drift. "They've earned every bit of it." We caught nothing for an hour, maybe more. Just talked about our families, about baseball, about anything and everything except work. Eventually, Harold asked, his gaze thoughtful, "Do you ever think about how it all played out, Caleb? The whole mess with Julian and the private equity firm?" I considered the question for a long moment. The past 18 months had been the most challenging, and ultimately the most rewarding, of my entire career. Taking back the company, rebuilding the systems, reshaping the culture, finding a new, healthier balance between my work and my family. "I think about the algorithm sometimes," I admitted. "How something I created alone in my apartment all those years ago became the foundation for so much, for so many people's livelihoods." "Any regrets?" Harold asked. I shook my head. "I could have left for another job years ago, probably should have when things started to change. I could have started my own company then, but I stayed because I believed in what we were building together, Harold. And now," I said, a sense of peace settling over me, "now I know the difference between loyalty and ownership, between just building something and truly belonging to it." My line suddenly went tight. I stood carefully, reeling in a decent-sized, feisty bass. After we got it into the boat, Harold laughed. "Still got the touch, Caleb." Later, as we headed back to shore, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, I noticed the Ironvale Technologies building visible in the Seattle skyline in the distance. its familiar logo catching the fading sunlight. It wasn't the same company anymore, better in many crucial ways, still finding its path in others. But it was ours now. Not just mine, not just Harold's, not just Elaine's. It belonged to everyone who had poured their talent, their dedication, their belief into rebuilding it, piece by piece. Some things, I realized, you can't truly own alone. And some things, the most important things, you shouldn't even try to. Thank you for joining Caleb on his incredible journey of resilience, innovation, and reclamation. If his story of turning betrayal into a triumphant return inspired you, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Please remember to subscribe to Life Stories and click that notification bell so you don't miss our next captivating real-life story. Your support and engagement are what make this channel possible.